Gonna start recording. Virtual camera. Huh. No thanks. So yeah, I am recording now. Hello and welcome. I could, let's see. So, I have about 100 more pages left to do in the whole entire book because I just whizzed past it because I am a beast. But I don't feel like reading it all tonight because I don't think I can. And that'd be just too exhausting. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to split it into hopefully two equal parts. Let me just do something real quick. Okay. But yeah, we shall begin. So, last time we left off was that Alexis and what's her face? Alexis and Megan were going to get more information on the whole ghost thing. And it turns out that Megan's mother died in Alexis's home due to I think it was asphyxiation by, I think, gas. Yeah, the gas pipe in the house had been disconnected. So Megan is traumatized and murder. Yeah. So Megan suspects it's her mother that's the ghost. And then Alexis is just like, we don't know that for sure, sort of thing. So yeah. Let me gauge how much I want to read tonight, just because. Okay. That's a little bit too much. So. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good place. Well, I'll just gauge how much I want to play. How much I want to read. Just to see, like, how I'm feeling. Alright, but let's not dilly-dally any longer. The next chapter is chapter 21. Alright, so chapter 21. I walked back inside, feeling like I might shatter into 100 pieces. Miss Oliver looked up as I passed the checkout desk. Is she back in school? I think so. Oh yeah, because Megan left her at the library. That's right, I forgot. So yeah, she's still at the library. Oh crap. I'm gonna make a little excursion. It won't take me more than like a minute. I'm gonna get water. Okay, I'm back. I just forgot that I had not gotten water beforehand. And I was just like, oh no, how can I function? Okay. So, yes. Chapter 21. I walked back inside, feeling like I might shatter into 100 pieces. Miss Oliver looked up as I passed the checkout desk. I felt myself swing over to her, almost as if I'd been drawn there by a magnet. Excuse me? I said. Is there any way I can get back to special collections? She glowered and beckoned me closer. If you aren't 18, you need to be accompanied by a parent or guardian. She looked me up and down with an expression that said she knew I wasn't 18. I nodded and tried to hide my disappointment. I didn't have the energy to persist. All right, I said. Thanks. Never mind. Back at the microfiche, back at the microfiche, I decided to check out articles from the days following the deaths. I pulled another few sheets from drawer 5E. Sheet after sheet of slides turned up. Yeah, sheet after sheet of slides turned up absolutely nothing. I felt totally lost, aimless, without Megan, but I had no choice other than to keep on going. I was rereading the printout of the first article when... Hold on. Okay. Yeah, I was rereading the printout of the first article when Miss Oliver appeared. Her eyes widened at the sight of the mess I'd made, but she seemed grimly gratified that someone was actually doing research. Find what you're looking for? She asked. I shrugged. I guess so. I wouldn't normally say this, she said, peering down at me, but you seem so committed to your project that I hate to deny you access to research materials. I stared up at her, not understanding. The library closes in 30 minutes, she said, speaking a little more slowly. If you need to look at any special books, I'll let you know. Oh. And then I got it. Oh, thanks. I'll be right there. Oh, let me say it again. Yeah, she had to lay it out for Lexi. Yeah, but I said it wrong. If you need to look at any special books, I'll let you. Oh, and then I got it. Oh, thanks. I'll be right there. I had one more stack of slides left to look at. I considered skimming them, but I wanted as much time with the special collections as possible. So instead, I slipped the whole pile into my bag and made my way up to the front desk. The library was deserted except for a few die-hard academics. The clock hands pointed to 8:30. Damn, that's late. Also, let me just... Okay. There we go. Yeah, the library was deserted except for a few die-hard academics. The clock hands pointed to 8:30. Miss Oliver beckoned me around the back of her desk to a door I'd never even noticed before. She unlocked it, reached inside, and flipped on a light switch. I'll come get you. She checked her watch. In 25 minutes. I nodded and slipped past her through the doorway. The door closed with a sharp bark of wood against wood, and I was alone. The only light was the dim green glow of a dying pair of fluorescent light bulbs. It took my eyes a moment to adjust, and then I saw the shelves. They took my breath away. 7 feet tall, overflowing with books of every shape and size, all colors and ages and thicknesses. They completely encircled the L-shaped room with one. Yeah, they completely encircled the L-shaped room with a few lined up in the middle of the floor as well. On closer inspection, most of the special collections didn't seem at all unusual. Just a bunch of dusty old books. I crossed my fingers that I wouldn't have any trouble finding the section I was looking for. I didn't have to worry. The paranormal books filled an entire giant bookshelf of their own, and unlike the rest of the books in the room, they seemed almost to hum. They really were special. Thinking I should be methodical. I started at the bottom, but pulling out each book, opening it, and then carefully returning it to the overcrowded shelf was too slow. New strategy. New strategy. I grabbed a book randomly from one of the middle shelves and looked at the cover. It was a paperback called Interpreting and Healing the Aura, and the cover was an 80s style man with a feathered haircut looking serenely up at a rainbow. A halo of pale gold glowed from his head. Close, but not quite right. I pulled more books out, one by one, and glanced at the titles. Most were completely irrelevant. I know what they say about judging books by their covers and all, but I was running out of time. So I decided to ignore the newer books and focus on the ones with darker leather covers, the old ones. I pushed a white paperback out of the way to get to a black leather spine with gold writing on it. The Origins of Pagan Holidays. Forget it. I pushed another white paperback out of the way to get a half-disintegrated blue cloth book. Supernatural Case Studies in Northern Ireland, 1952 to 1966. Then I saw a black spine peeking out from behind a white paperback and reached up to push the white book out of the way. What was with all the white paperbacks? And then I realized there was only one white paperback on the shelf, and I couldn't seem to stop picking it up. When I touched it, a tiny lightning bolt of electricity jumped from the book to my fingers. I yanked my hand away and took a closer look at the cover. Unlike the cherry rainbows and seagulls on the other paperbacks, this one had a rough charcoal illustration of a woman whose face was distorted in a scream, her eyes rolling back in pain or fear or something. The title was Dealing with Hostile Spirits, a Definitive Guide. I flipped it over to inspect the back cover and saw a picture with the author, an Asian man in his 50s. Walter Sawamura is an international renowned expert on the subject of Sawamura? These Sawamuras, Walter and Joanne, the people who lived in our house after Megan and her mom. So, an expert on ghosts, not just ghosts, but hostile ones, moved into our house after a mysterious suicide and moved out as soon as he could manage. Ah, Okay, sorry. I got interrupted. Alright, yeah. So, an expert on ghosts, not just ghosts, but hostile one, moved into our house after a mysterious suicide and moved out as soon as he could manage. Suddenly, the thin white paperback seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Then I snapped out of it. I had to be ready to leave before Miss Oliver came back for me. I stuffed the book in my bag and started for the door, which flew open just as I was reaching for the doorknob. I shrieked and jumped backward. Miss Oliver looked at me like I was out of my mind. A little jumpy, are we? I didn't feel like making small talk. I'm fine. I turned sideways to squeeze past her. We were the last two people in the library. I was nearest the exit. As I was near as I was near the As I neared the exit, I saw the security sensors up on either side of the door and stopped short. Yeah, as I neared the exit, I saw the security sensors set up on either side of the door and stopped short. The barcode on the barcode on the book in my bag would set off the alarm, and then she would catch me. Yeah, and then she would catch me. Sorry, I'm getting distracted again. Yeah, yeah, the barcode on the back. Yeah, the barcode on the book in my bag would set off the alarm, and then she would catch me, or I would have to run. I took a deep breath. If I bolted, would she chase me? Did she know my name? Wait a second, Miss Oliver called from behind the counter. We'll walk out together, she said, reaching beneath her desk and flipping a few switches. All of the library lights switched off, and the red power light on the security sensors faded. No alarm sounded as we walked through in silence, and I waited as Miss Oliver locked the front door and lowered the gate to lock and lowered the gate and locked that too. I had no idea that libraries were having such security issues. Maybe because of people like me, who steal rare books and microfiche slides. Is someone coming for you? Miss Oliver asked, looking around. No, I said, but it's okay. I'll just walk. Walk? Walk? She asked doubtfully. That isn't safe. Where do you live? Whitley Street, I said. She looked at me like I was a stray cat who'd taken up residence on her porch. I'll drive you, she said at last, unlocking the door to the only car in the lot, an old square Buick with doling paint. We rode in silence. When we reached Whitley Street, I pointed to my house. She slowed the car. This house? She asked. How many times had my friend's parents asked me that question in that tone of voice? It was so clear to me now. They really meant it. The haunted one? Yeah. It was so clear to me now. They really meant this awful house with a horrible, violent past? You live, eat, sleep, brush your teeth in this terrible place? Yep, this one, I said. It was the same thing I'd always said. And that is the end of that chapter. Yeah, All right. On to chapter 22. Chapter 22. I closed the door quietly behind me. Alexis, is that you? Mom's voice called out. I dropped my bags on the stairs and crossed the hall to the kitchen, where Mom stood in front of the open freezer door, studying the stacks of TV dinners. Sorry I didn't call you, I said, steeling myself for a lecture. That's all right, she said. I just got home myself. Casey told me where you were. I glanced at the staircase. She did? Doing research at the library, right? Yeah. Your sister's been working too. She's totally wrapped up in some project for school. Mom spoke quick. Let me say it again. Your sister's been working too. She's totally wrapped up in some project for school. Mom spoke quietly, like we were gossiping. It's not like her. I've never seen her so dedicated. Was all I could manage. I'm microwaving taquitos for Casey. Did you eat yet? No, but I'm not hungry, I said, and then grabbed my bag and climbed the stairs. As I neared my bedroom door, Casey's door opened and she took a half step out into the hallway. She stared at me with cold eyes, her arms crossed in front of her chest. Long night at the library? She asked. I didn't answer, just walked into my room, holding my head as high as I could manage. When the door was safely locked behind me, I set my stuff down and took a few long, deep breaths. Fuck, I would too. My god, that's terrifying. I changed out of my jeans into a pair of sweatpants and sat on the floor at the foot of the bed with my bag in front of me, ready to do more research. Speaking of research, what was this mysterious project of my sister's? Stealing the reports from school, reading up on all those families. What could any of it have to do with Shara? After a minute, Mom's voice called up the stairs announcing dinner, and I heard Casey thump briskly by, leaving her room unwatched. Ghost vengeance. Yep, ghost vengeance. Yeah, and I heard Casey thump briskly by, leaving her room unwatched. But for how long? I peered out into the hall. Voices drifted up from the kitchen. Mom's tired chatter and Casey's emotionless staccato. And I figured, if this was going to happen, it had to happen now. I stayed close to the wall for I stayed close to the wall for the 10 feet I had to press. Yeah, for the 10 feet I had to press. For the 10 feet I had to pass to get to Casey's door. Then I ducked inside and looked around to make sure there were no ghosts playing rent-a-cop for her. Coast clear. I tried to forget the feeling that had come over me when I'd been in there the previous night. The feeling that I now suspected meant I wasn't alone. But the air seemed dry and held only a faint aroma of dolls, a mixture of dust, plastic hair, and something like old books. So I was alone, for now. The room looked like a tornado had hit it, as usual. Casey's desk was a mess with books and loose papers. She'd been busy, all right. But why? I went closer to the desk and saw a stack of photocopies and other papers. I grabbed the stack and flipped through it. The photocopies were pages from public records, mostly birth and death announcements. The other pages were hand-drawn or computer-drawn family trees. There were 5 of them, and at the top of each was a name and a page number. They'd been torn from her classmates' ancestor reports. So I guess the whole thing about returning them was a lie. I stopped on one that had culminated. Yeah, I stopped on one that. Yeah, I stopped on one that culminated in Melissa Margaret Laird, Mimi. The tree went all the way back through several generations, and Casey had either highlighted or crossed out several of the names on the page. Same for the rest of the reports. I set them down and tugged the red notebook out of the pile of the desk. I opened it and skipped through pages of Casey's school notes. There were about 10 new pages at the end, and the first few were filled in Casey's messy chicken scratch. Not just words, but interlocking circles and a ragged tree, not just words, but interlocking circles, a ragged tree, random chaotic doodles. The effect was mesmerizing, and I found myself staring for several moments before I suddenly realized I didn't know how long I'd been standing there. I had a feeling that Casey wouldn't just leave her precious work unprotected for long. I was about to make a run for my room when I noticed the last page. It was covered in lists written in the smallest scrawl imaginable. The page was so full that if you blurred your eyes, it looked gray. And she'd written everything backward, like like that movie where the kid writes red rum all over the place. Yeah, that's scary. I would be like, oh fuck no, ghost journal. Joan roll? What's Joan roll, Chandler? Joan roll? Now, now everyone on the internet must know what Joan roll is. What's Joan roll? It's a crime. Oh man. Damn. This ghost is like just crying. Crying, crying, crying. Okay. I'm glad you did not edit that one. Okay. Back to the story. And she'd written everything backward, like that movie where the kid writes red rum all over the place. I picked one list to try and focus on. It took forever to get my brain adjusted to reading backward. Ivy Coleman, Ridge, died 1974. 3 children. 1 son, 3 question marks. Ridge, daughter, question mark, question mark. Number 2, daughter, Rhonda Ridge Hutchins, died 1983. 1 daughter. Daughter, Mary Hutchins. Number 3, son, John Ridge, died 1990. 2 daughters. Daughter, Eve Ridge, Hamilton. Daughter, Dolores Ridge, Oliver. Dolores Oliver? Librarian Dolores Oliver? I didn't recognize any of the other names. I needed more time with the list, but Casey was still working on it. She'd notice right away if it was gone. I listened out in the hallway but couldn't hear anything but TV noises from downstairs. Maybe Casey had decided to take a load off for a while and watch some game shows. I had an idea. Clutching the notebook close, I darted down the hall and through the study to the dark room. The paper was thick, but she'd written in dark ink, so maybe that would work if I set the exposure long enough. Except I was out of photo paper. Then I remembered my extra fancy matte paper, the stuff Dad got me last Christmas. It cost like $2 a page, and to make sure I didn't accidentally use it for regular stuff, I kept it wrapped in a towel at the bottom of one of the bathroom drawers. Casey didn't even Casey didn't even know existed. So maybe. I opened the drawer. It was there. There it was. I put a page down under the enlarger and set Casey's list. Yeah, way easier. Yeah, I put the page down on under the enlarger and then set Casey's list, print side down, right on top of it. I cranked the timer and let it run for 10 seconds. 20, 45. Finally, after a minute, the light clicked off. This was taking way too long. I dropped the paper in the developer and ran back out of the hallway with the original. Footsteps were thumping up the stairs. I dashed into Casey's room, nearly tripped over a shoe on the way to her desk, and slammed the page back onto her notebook. But there was no time to get out. I hurled myself into the closet. It was practically impossible to keep my breathing quiet, especially if Casey came sauntering in and looked around. I watched through the slat as she stretched her arms like a cat, and then sat on the floor of the bed, on the foot of the bed, looking around the room. She didn't seem to know I was there. Come on, come on. The print was cooking in the developer right now. I'd be lucky if it wasn't just a solid square of black, but I had more immediate problems. Casey pressed her hands to her temples and shook her head like she was trying to shake something off. She squinted her eyes shut and pinched the bridge of her nose. Then her whole body jerked, and just like that, the struggle was over. Her movements became fluid, deliberate. She smoothed her hair down and looked around the room. I felt nauseated. It wasn't Casey anymore. She froze, and her hazy eyes focused, hardened with the effort of listening. Don't look in the closet, don't look in the closet. She stood up, tilting her head to one side. I held my breath. She took a half step toward me. The bedroom door opened. Casey drew black. Nope! Yeah, nope. Yeah, Casey drew back and blinked as she looked toward the hallway. Casey, honey, I need you to get your clothes out of the dryer. What? Casey asked. Her fingers fidgeted and tugged at the belt loops of her jeans. Your laundry? Mom said. The laundry you were supposed to fold? Casey sighed, took a last worry look around and left. As soon as I heard her feet on the stairs, I ran back to the dark room, yanked the page out of the developer and slipped it into the stop bath. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. Yep. Yes, she does. Yeah, Casey sighed, took a last wary look around and left. As soon as I heard her feet on the stairs, I ran back to the dark room, yanked the page out of the developer, and slipped it into the stop bath. It was dark, but legible. And as added bonus, the words that had been backward on Casey's page were now normal. Lists and lists of names in unsteady handwriting. There would be time to read them later. I did a rushed version of my usual cleanup, stowed the photo paper back in the drawer in case I needed it again, and went back to my room with the print hidden under my shirt. I sat on my bed, trying in vain to make a connection between the names on Casey's paper. Finally, I set the list aside and moved on, pulling the library book and microfiche slides out of my bag. I held one slide at a time but couldn't make out any details, just little blocks of text and teensy black squares. A series of quick taps on the door made me jump and drop the slide. "Alexis?" Mom called. "Hold on," I said. "It's locked." I opened the door to see her standing in the hallway with her jacket on and a briefcase in hand. "Oh, man." "So, listen," Mom said. "I have to go back to the office for a while and try to make up some work from yesterday. Just an hour or so. The new senior VP is coming Friday, and I really want to be prepared." I could hear the excitement in her voice. Suddenly, I felt bad for Mom, really bad. Imagine working for something for years, watching people get hired below you and then promoted to be your boss. Imagine your family never saying thank you or even telling you they're sorry you worked so hard and nobody acknowledges it. What was this? Challenge Alexis's long-held Assumptions Day? "Can you hold down the fort for a while?" Sure." Alone with Casey? Alone with Casey. I tried not to think about it. Mom shifted her briefcase to her other hand. "Mom?" I said. "Hmm?" "I know you really want to get promoted, but, even if you don't, you're still, running out of words here. I mean, thanks for working so hard." She smiled. "That means a lot to me." Then she touched my shoulder and left. I settled onto my bed and stared at the bookshelves across the room. I couldn't bring myself to put the vandalized yearbook back in its place, so I stuffed it into the bottom drawer of my desk. No sound came. "By the way, Mom, I love you, whatever." "Yeah, uh-huh." Okay. I settled onto my bed and stared at the bookshelves across the room. I couldn't bring myself to put the vandalized yearbook back in its place, so I stuffed it into the bottom drawer of my desk. No sound came from Casey's room, but I could imagine what she was doing, sitting hunched over her desk, making lists and more lists and randomly copying names down into her notebook. I fell back against the pillows and closed my eyes, too weary to sit up. I tried to clear my thoughts, but I kept remembering Megan's face as she read the article and learned the horrible truth about her mother. Then I thought of innocent toddler Megan in the photo at the lake with her grandmother, oblivious to the fact that the woman with the camera was soon going to try and kill her. How long had Shara planned before she got up the nerve to actually go through with it? When she looked through the lens that day, had she looked at Megan with hatred? But how could you take such a photo hating your subject? How could you wait until the light shined perfectly on the water behind her, catching the windswept flyaways of her baby curls, the deep thoughtfulness of her tiny eyes? There was love in that picture. I thought of the charm bracelet Megan had worn that day, the one she still wore every day, hiding her past beneath her expensive sweaters and cheerleading uniform. Then I realized with a start, my charm. It wasn't just any charm. If Megan had lived here, that meant mine was probably the other half of hers. Our house before Our house before this one had been tiny and cramped, so the Gothic expanses ship it. Yes, I know you do. Uh, yeah, our house before this one had been tiny and cramped, so the Gothic expanses of the new one towered over me. I was 7 years old. It took me 2 years to figure out that we didn't actually live in a mansion. That first night, after Mom tucked me in and gave me a kiss, I, I lay staring up at the ceiling, and that's when I heard it, the whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway, but when I peeked out, nobody was there. I dove back under the covers, and the whispers seemed to get louder. Even with my hands over my ears, I could hear the voice slithering and hissing like a nest of snakes in my head, until finally I can make out two words: "Come play." It must be Casey, I decided, but it was too late to play. Thanks to Casey's day-long series of screeching temper tantrums, the whole family was trained. Our parents were exhausted with a capital E, and any little girl caught sneaking out of her bedroom would be in trouble with a capital T. "Come play," the whispers begged. I folded the pillows over the sides of my head to block out the sound, but it didn't work. I was determined not to go to my sister's room, but I felt drawn to the window and figured that wasn't breaking any rules. I gave in. I gave in to the urge and went to the cushioned window seat, pressing my hands flat against the panes of glass. Then I reached down and unlatched the window, pushing it up and letting in the cold night air. "Come play." Something rose up inside me, a burst of bravery, and for some reason I decided that I must climb out of the window. I must climb the giant tree. I had to do it to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid of the new house. As I knelt and began to stick one foot out of the window, the whispers grew louder and more excited, and I grew more confident that what I was doing was absolutely the right thing. Think how mo- think how proud think how proud Mom and Dad would be the next day. Think how impressed Casey would be. I set one foot lightly on the roof and shifted a bit of my weight to it, but my foot slipped a little on the loose shingles, and I thrust a hand toward the wall behind the curtain. Yeah, behind the curtain to steady myself. I got my balance back, but as my hands pressed against the wall, panic surged inside of me. The whispers became slower, angrier, as I stared down at the 20-foot drop of off the edge of the roof. Suddenly, I didn't want to come play. It was wrong. It was dangerous. My parents wouldn't be proud. They'd be horrified. My hand felt my hand felt along the wall for something to grab onto, to get the strength to pull myself back inside. I was distracted by hmm, I was distracted by the swirling roars of whispers in my head, scolding me and beseeching me to come play, come play, come play. What my hand found was a small piece of metal tied to a loose ribbon, hanging off a tiny nail in the wall. What my hand found was a small piece of metal tied with a loop of ribbon. hang, hanging off a tiny nail in the wall. I grabbed the metal, and the whispers went silent. With a burst of energy, I hauled myself back inside and shut the window, locking it, and climbed back into bed. In the moonlight, I stared at the object in my hand, a flat, a flat silver heart, cut in half with a smoothed over zigzag edge. There were some letters on it: S, H, and half an A, and below them M, E, and round the back what could have been a Q or an O or a G. When I woke up the next morning, I would have thought the whole thing was a dream, except for the presence of the charm and ribbon, which I had wrapped around and around my little hand and held onto like a talisman. For years, I slept with that heart under my pillow. I never really stopped to wonder where it came from or who it belonged to. I liked it on some deep level, and I thought on the same deep level that it liked me back. It was my lucky charm. The whispers never bothered me again. After 8th grade, when Beth and her mom moved away, I gave up on the concept of luck. If there was any such thing, I figured I was getting the bad end of it. Better to reject the whole idea outright than keep inviting bad luck to kick me around. So I packed the charm in my treasure box of knickknacks and tried and forgot it existed. So I packed the charm in my treasure box of knickknacks and forgot it existed. To put it simply, our attic is an abomination. Box after box of old clothes, worn out bed linens, and faded ripped towels. My childhood toys, passed on to Casey, and then hidden away and forgotten. A few pieces of furniture covered in white sheets that glowed in the moonlight like phantoms. It's like a graveyard for household goods. It's intimidating even in daylight. As I stepped off the ladder onto the creaking floorboards, I took a deep breath, flicked on the dim overhead light, and looked around. Just had to find my treasure box. Yeah, I just had to find my treasure box, which was in the attic, somewhere. It was clearly hopeless. In the 2 years since I had stored it, approximately 8 million more pieces of junk had been shoved in front of it. Yeah, approximately 8 million more pieces of junk had been shoved in front of it. I plowed all the way to the back wall and found nothing. I moved Casey's old pink radio. I moved Casey's old pink clock radio out of the way and reached for a box behind it. The radio turned on by its the radio turned on all by itself. I clearly jumped out of my skin until I realized where the music was coming from. Then I saw the clock was on, red numbers and everything, and the radio was playing. And all the while I could see the cord neatly coiled up around it, not plugged in. I spun around to see if someone was in the room with me, but I was alone. The tingy twang of a pop country singer poured out of the speakers, occasionally fading out under a wave of static, and without thinking, I kept my hands held out in front of me, as if the clock was going to fly at me and I was going to block it. And though we may be apart, you're always in my heart, so baby, please come home. I stared down at the radio, afraid to touch it. What if I got a shock? Because home is where the heart is. The radio switched off. I stepped back. Home is where the heart is. All week, that phrase kept popping up. Carter had said it to me in the car. It was my fortune cookie. It was the title of the school librarian's book. It was almost like someone was trying to tell me something. Well, I was looking for a heart. Home is where the heart is. Home. I looked around. My eyes dropped to an old dollhouse, wedged between a bed frame and a stack of old boxes. It was just a guess, a dumb hunch. I was I was embarrassed and a little irritated at myself for even considering it, but I walked over to the dollhouse anyway. Yeah, I guess it was just a guess, a dumb hunch. Wait, hold on. I wasn't paying attention to what I was reading. Yeah, home is where the heart is. Home. I looked around. My eyes stopped on the old dollhouse, wedged between a bed frame and a stack of old boxes. It was just a guess, a dumb hunch. I was embarrassed and a little irritated myself for even considering it, but I walked over to the dollhouse anyway and peered in the window. My treasure box. Home is where the heart is. I knelt on the floor. The box lit up by the shaft of the moon. The box lit up by the shaft of moonlight, and carefully lifted out each item until I came to a little velveteen coin purse. I loosened the braided rope and held it upside down over my hand. The heart charm and its ribbon tumbled out and landed in my palm. I went back to my room and spent the next hour and a half staring at what had been once my most prized possession, trying to figure out how something I trusted so much as a little girl could be connected to someone who turned out to be so evil. Mom's car pulled into the garage at 11:50 p.m. When I heard her come up the stairs, I followed her into her room and closed the door. I had a plan. "Oh, Alexis," she said, yawning. "What are you still doing up?" "Can I sleep in here tonight?" "Well, of course you can. Is everything all right?" "Yep," I lied. I just need to turn off my bedroom light." I closed the door behind me and walked back to my room. The heart charm was right where I'd left it, on the dresser. I debated for a few seconds, then tucked it into my pocket, switched off the lamp, and went back into the hall. I almost ran smack into my sister. She stood in the middle of the hall. Yeah, she stood in the middle of the hall, her body angled toward Mom and Dad's bedroom, eyes fixed on the doorknob. I froze. Slowly, slowly, she turned to face me. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice soft and casual. "Case? Is it you?" Her face looked angelic in the soft gold of the hall light. "Of course it's me, Lexi. What are you doing?" She looked around, then shrugged. "Nothing, I guess." "Well, maybe you should go back to bed," I said. Her lips pressed together in a pout. "See?" she hissed. "This is why I had to find a better friend than you. My other friend never bosses me around." We stared into each other's eyes. "I just don't want anyone else to get hurt," I said at last. "Then you should be more careful about whose room. Yeah, then you should be more careful whose room. Yeah, then you should be more careful whose bedroom you snoop around in," she said. turning on her heel and stalking back into her room. The door closed behind her, all by itself. And that is the end of that chapter. It is getting gnarly. Holy shit, this is a fucking big chapter. It's a huge chapter. Oh yeah, and it's gonna be the last one I'm gonna read anyway, because I already decided on it. Or maybe I'll read to 25. Maybe I'll read to 25. Okay. Yeah, so chapter 23. Chapter 23. A sudden shock of bright light hit my eyelids, jerking me out of my sleep. For a moment I wondered where I was. Then I saw the pale blue floral of the bedspread and remembered. Mom stood at the window, dressed up and made up, her dirty blonde bob neatly turned under. "Sorry," she said. "That was brighter than I thought it would be." I looked at the clock. 7:12. "I'm going in early today," she said. "You'll be all right getting to school?" "I'll manage," I said, sitting up and swinging my feet to the floor. Hold on. Sorry, had to blow my nose. Okay. Yeah. I looked at the clock. 7:12. "I'm going in early today," she said. "You'll be all right getting to school?" "I'll manage," I said, sitting up and swinging my feet to the floor. She kissed me on the top of my head and hurried out. I heard her knock on Casey's door and then call goodbye from the hallway. I waited until I felt the rumble of the garage door closing after her and went back to my own room. I grabbed a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, careful not to wear school colors again, and took the world's fastest shower and ran down to the kitchen and swigged a cup of orange juice. "Where's the fire?" Casey said darkly from Yeah, where's the fire? Casey said darkly from the kitchen doorway. I didn't answer. For now, she just seemed to be regular grumpy morning Casey. I stuck my hand in my pocket and felt the smooth edge of the heart charm, suddenly wondering if it had been wise to bring it downstairs with me. If Casey got too close to it, would Shara gain some evil power from it? Would she recognize it and demand it back? What if it reminded her of Megan? I let go and brought my hand out of my pocket. I have to run, I said, rinsing out my cup and setting it on the counter. I grabbed my backpack from the bottom of the stairs and left. I walked toward the stool. I'd brand the cross into Casey at this point. Damn. I bet you would. ghost does gotta get gone one way or another. Okay. Yeah, I walked to the school as far as the stop sign on. Yeah, I walked to the school as far as the stop sign on the corner. Then went all the way around the block and came back to my house from the other direction. I crept I crept I crept across the side yard and stood behind the overgrown bushes while I waited for Casey to make her appearance. Surrey Middle started at 8:30, so she should have been out of the house by 8:15, but she came sauntering out at 7:54. Yeah, but she came sauntering out at 7:54 and started down the street in the opposite direction of from the middle school. She had she held a stack of notebooks in her arms as she strode down the sidewalk, oblivious to anything around her, including me, as I followed a half block behind. I tried to stay out of her eye line, but I didn't have to worry. She was hell-bound for her destination and didn't even care to look behind her once. I followed her I followed her the 5 blocks to the quaint little downtown shopping to the quaint little downtown shopping district where moms with strollers and men and women in suits seemed to dominate the sidewalks. No one noticed my sister as she trudged up the stairs of Town Hall. I went in after her and just caught a glimpse of the back of her sweatshirt as it disappeared into the hall, down the hall. "Pardon me, miss," said a man sitting next to a metal detector. "Can I help you?" "That's my sister," I said. "I have to ask her something." "She was here all day yesterday, too," he said. He waved me through the metal detector, and I darted through the crowds to see where Casey had gone. I found a long hallway and went all the way to the end, where there was a single door. A metal sign on it. A metal sign on it read, "Hall of Records." By the time I got to school, first period was half over. I figured I might as well go to the office and get my late slip before Mrs. Anderson sent me. But when I told the secretary I'd been over seeing my dad at St. Margaret's Hospital for lack of a better story. She wrote me a pass without marking it in the book. "You take care now, dear," she said, handing it over with a sad smile. Between classes, I stopped by my locker and felt a dozen pair of eyes on me. The cheerleaders were all staring warily from their row of lockers. They were clustered so tightly that I couldn't see Megan. But really, it didn't matter. What could I possibly say to her? I arrived at fourth period and sat in my usual desk at the back of the room. I was flipping through my textbook when I caught a flash of red and white out of the corner of my eye. "Hey," someone said. I glanced up to see Megan standing next to me. "Oh, hi," I said. Um, "Will you sit next to me?" She asked, playing with the hem of her satin cheerleading uniform. I hesitated for a millisecond, wondering if the people around us were paying attention. It was long enough that Megan's eyes flickered away self-consciously. "Yeah, of course," I said, picking up my bag off the floor. I followed her across the room. She gestured to an empty desk. "It's okay," she said. "Chloe sits there. She'll move." I set my stuff down and got settled. Another girl in a cheerleading uniform, Chloe, came wandering over and exchanged whispers with Megan. Then she went across the room to my usual seat. I looked expectantly at Megan, thinking she had a question or something. She wrinkled her nose and gave a sad little tip of her head. No real reason, she said. I just wanted to be around someone who understands. I'm really sorry, I said. It's okay, she said. I'm trying to figure out how to stop thinking about. What? This sucks! I looked up to see Lydia standing a few aisles over, glaring down at Chloe. It's cool, Lyd, I said. I tried to wave her over so I could explain, but she didn't budge. No, not cool, she said. They took your chair. Everyone in the classroom, including the teacher, seemed to be enjoying the conversation. No, I said, they didn't. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried, she said. She drew up to her full 5 foot nothing. I'm pissed on your behalf. Lydia, I said loudly, because loudness is the only thing that gets her attention. I'm fine. Go sit down. Leave it alone. But I want to sit here, I said, and the whole class fell silent and stared at me. I figured, what the hell, and added, next to Megan. Lydia sputtered and sniffed and plunked down in her own seat. I turned to Megan and rolled my eyes. Sit with me at lunch? She asked. This time I nodded right away, not stopping to look around and worry about who was watching or what they were thinking. And as class progressed, I found myself actually looking forward to lunch, not just because it was something new, but because I felt a connection with Megan, more than all the haunted house stuff, more than my crushing sadness over the circumstances of her mother's death, and the circumstances of her discovering those circumstances. Megan is my girlfriend now. Who wants to fight? It be like that. It totally be like that. Okay. But yeah. Yeah. Yeah, as class progressed, I found myself actually looking forward to lunch. Not just because it was something new, but because I felt a connection with Megan. More than all the haunted house stuff. More than my crushing sadness over the circumstances of her mother's death and the circumstances of her discovering those circumstances. No, it was something like the old Beth feeling. A kindred spirit kind of thing. As the bell rang, Megan stood up with her bag slung over her shoulder and waited for me to gather my things. We made our way down the hall side by side, and I felt like some old rusty door was opening up inside of me, releasing something that had been bottled up for years. She chewed silently, looking blankly ahead. I swallowed the last bite of my rice pilaf, and reached down to my pocket for my heart charm. So, I realized, I said, hesitating. Yesterday, at your house, when I said I had the same kind of necklace as you, I set it gently on the table. It's the other half of yours, isn't it? No, I think that was Megan saying that. It's the other half of yours, isn't it? She reached into her collar and pulled out the. Yeah, she reached into her collar and pulled the chain out. Hers had the letters R.A. and G.A.N. Shara, Megan. Yeah, she said. Do you want this one too? She stared up. She stared at it for a long minute, then shook her head. Yeah, she stared at it. She stared at it for a long minute, then shook her head. Nah, you keep it. Seriously? Seriously, she said, swirling her bottled water. How's your sister? Did she hurt? We, yeah, how's your sister? Weird. Did she hurt you again? No, she's really busy making these lists of names. It's kind of obsessive. Megan frowned. I'm sort of hoping she'll get bored of it and, stop. I mean, bossing people around is fun, but clerical work isn't that cool. That'd be good, Megan said. We ate in comfortable silence. When the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Megan reached into her bag and pulled out a paperback book with a purple cover. The title was Things That Go Bump in the Night. Take this. It might help you, she said. I took the book and made a move to lift the necklace off the table. Look, Megan said, pointing it at a carrot stick. Pointing at it with a carrot stick. It says shame. S-H-A-M-E. Shame. I never thought of it that way, I said, scooping it up into my pocket. Funny, Megan said, not smiling. That's what the whole damn thing is. A shame. After the final bell rang, I went to my locker. Carter was waiting for me. I'll drive you home? He asked. I nodded and followed him out to his car. I made a conscious effort not to notice the curious stares in our direction, but that made me notice them that much more. You all right? Carter said as we pulled out of the lot. I nodded again, looking out the window at the throngs of kids happy to be done with their school day. If you need to talk about anything, I'm here, he said, his voice gentle. I felt so bad yesterday. I can tell something's going on. No, he was just too nice. I cannot let my horrible life leak inky black misery all over what he'd managed to rebuild for himself. I never thought I would say this, but Pepper was so right. Carter, I said, before I could stop myself. I can't go to the dance with you. What? Why? There was a hint of nervous laughter in his voice, and he shot me a bewildered half smile as he reached forward to turn off the radio. I just can't, I said, taken aback by the sudden shock of disappointment I felt. You mean you don't have a reason? His smile seemed plastered on, like this was just one more amusing example of Alexis's bad girl antics. I do have a reason, I said. You wouldn't understand. He laughed. Try me. Listen, I don't care. We can skip the dance. We can do whatever. No, I said, it's not about the dance. We can't do anything. Alexis? His voice trailed off and the smile faded from his lips. You should take Pepper, I said. He gave a confused snort. Why would I take Pepper? She really likes you. Alexis, I don't want to go to the dance with Pepper Laird. I want to go with you. Oh, this sucked. This was so hard. Every fiber of my being wanted to change my mind, apologize, say whatever needed to be said to get Carter to forgive me. Well, well, I try to force myself to sound nonchalant. You can't. He pulled into my driveway and braked a little too abruptly. I'm sorry, I said. It's not you. I unhooked my seatbelt and he reached over to put his fingers on my forearm. His touch sent shivers through my body, but I shrugged his hand away. I have to go. I got out of the car and closed the door. He rolled down the window. There's something you weren't telling me. I'm sorry, Carter. I'm sorry, Carter, I said. Please just go. Reluctantly, he rolled up the window and drove off. I trudged up the walk, feeling as if there were a dark veil hanging over me that would never go away. I was trying to sort out the storm of thoughts about what had just happened. I'm a horrible person. I've hurt him. He didn't deserve that. But better now than later. It wasn't until I looked up and realized I was halfway up the stairs that I paused to wonder if Casey was home. But the house was empty, and wherever she'd gone, she'd taken all of her research materials with her, so I had nothing to snoop into. Instead, I sat on my bed with Megan's book, and the one I'd stolen from the library in front of me. Megan's book looked like it was written for middle school kids, maybe even younger than that. The cover art was a cartoony picture of a ghost. I looked inside the front cover and saw, in Megan's precise handwriting, Megan Wiley, 1026 Primrose Avenue, July 2004. I skimmed over the first few chapters, which just gave definitions of different types of paranormal activity. Ghosts versus demons versus poltergeists. Frankly, I didn't care what we had. I just wanted to make it go away. Chapter 4. Haunted Houses. Explained that spirits often take on the emotions they felt as they died. So a person who died under stress or in pain would be more active and violent than one who died in his or her sleep. The spirit could lie dormant for years before choosing to wake up and raise havoc, often on or near a significant date. The day Shara died, October 15th. The day Casey was supposed to make her decision, October 15th. Perfect. I looked around the room again and felt the horror of what happened in the house. I looked around the room again and felt the horror of what had happened in the house sink down like a weight on my shoulders. A woman had died horribly, and she was still here. Something had awakened her. I remembered the story, my casual mention of Megan. Was that all it took? Did I remind the sleeping ghost of her murderous past? Did I wake her up and somehow instill a need to finish what she started? At the end of chapter 4, said that in most cases, avenging or solving a mystery or murder would cause the ghosts to move on. But there was no crime to solve. Megan escaped. Shara died. Not the kind of case that takes a lot of detective work. I set that book down and picked up Walter Sawamura's, the one from the library. This was definitely intended for adults. I glanced over the chapter names, identifying a spirit, symptoms of hostility, seeking professional help, practical concerns of living with spirits, anchor objects, the ties that bind. I stopped at that one. I'd never heard an anchor object. Yeah, I've never heard of an anchor object. I turned to that chapter and began to read. According to Mr. Sawamura, some ghosts and spirits find themselves attached to a physical object. The object is kind of like an anchor holding a boat in place. The boat can drift, but it can't go too far from the anchor. Often, all their power is tied to this object, making it a power center. The power center is a strong supernatural force. Yeah, the power center is a strong supernatural force in and of itself. But by destroying it, you could free the spirit and force it to pass along to another plane, wherever that could wherever it would have gone if it hadn't been trapped. Was the necklace Shara's power was the necklace Shara's power center? Was it evil? All the possibilities I'd considered, I hadn't even thought of that. I mean, from the very beginning, the first night in the house, I believed it was on my side, protecting me, comforting me. How could something that made a person feel so safe be so bad? And Megan, she wore hers all day, every day, and nothing happened to her. It didn't make sense. My t-shirt and sweater were no match for the wind. Cool air sliced through them and covered my skin in goosebumps. I ran the door I rang the doorbell again and took a step backward off the stoop. Mary wasn't home. I went back home and stood in the kitchen like a watchdog, looking out the front window. A half hour later, Mary pulled into her driveway. I ran to catch her as she went inside. "Hello, Alexis," she said. Uh, hello, Alexis, she said, shooting me a weary glance. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not going to ask any more about my house." "Oh, good," she sighed. "Well, come in. You'll freeze out here." The living room was about 400 degrees. I took off my sweater and draped it over a chair as Mary tightened a knitted shawl over her shoulders. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I just need your help for a school project," I said. You've lived in Surrey your whole life, haven't you?" She smiled and nodded. "Born and raised." "Good," I said, unfolding the print of Casey's list. I chose one at random. "So, do you know the Pittman family?" "Oh, the Pittmans," she said, nodding slowly. "That was old Mr. Pittman with the butcher shop. Of course, he was long dead even when I was a girl, but the shop was around until the 1960s. I said, studying the names. "And who was Cora Pittman?" "Billings." "Mrs. Billings. That's right, she was a Pittman, wasn't she? She was a bit of a tragic figure. Her husband was killed in an automobile accident when I was very young, and it was quite sad, because she had a daughter who died of cancer. But there was another daughter, Jessie Billings, who married Philip Martin, the lawyer. Their daughter, Rosemary, was in my class at school." "How do you know all this?" I asked, a little in awe. She was like an encyclopedia. "Well," Mary said, "think about your friends. You know all about their families, don't you?" Not quite." I shook my head. "Oh," Mary said. She shifted unconsciously. "I mean, goodness, Alexis, we didn't have television back then. We just went around and visited. It was what we did for fun." She laughed. I can't tell you what I ate for dinner last night, but I know the names of all the men who were in the Chamber of Commerce with my father." "What about you?" I asked. "Who are your people?" "Let's see," she said, scratching her forehead and rocking absently in her chair. My mother was a Schmidt, and my father was a Ridge. Ridge? I interrupted. That was familiar. I searched the list of names. John Ridge? Why, no, he was Benedict Ridge. John Ridge was his brother. And Ivy Coleman was his mother? She looked surprised. Yes. How do you know that? Are you related to the librarian? Dolores Oliver? She rocked a little faster. Good heavens, Alexis, what do you have there? Yes, we're cousins, but we never spoke. His father didn't like the family. Yeah, her father didn't like the family. He was very religious, and he didn't approve of my grandfather's fondness for whiskey. I suppose that's silly. I suppose it's silly that I don't. I suppose it's silly that I don't just go say hello to her. My head was spinning. I have a picture of my grandmother. I have a picture of my grandmother, Mary said. Would you like to see it? Sure, I said, absently thinking I'd gotten all I was getting out of Mary. She shuffled away and shuffled back a minute later, with an ancient black and white photo in her hands. It was so old the white parts had silvery casts on them. She handed it to me gently. See? Second from the left. Second from the left, she said. Yeah, second. Second from the left, she said. The photo was a group of young girls lined up in their Sunday best and staring at the camera with solemn faces. I flipped the photo over and saw a list of names. Mildred Shore, Ivy Coleman, Patience O'Neill, Molly Saint, Cora Pittman, Mercy Bainbridge, Anne Patrick, Lucy Smith, Patience O'Neill. Patience O'Neill, Mary said, lowering herself back into her chair. She became a Michelson. That's your mother's family. Wow, I said. This is amazing. Why don't you keep it? She offered. I can't do that, I said. It wouldn't be right. What use do I have for it? Mary asked, waving dismissively. It's a piece of your family history. You should know where you come from. I looked at her face, creased and lined with age. Her eyeshadow had been applied with too heavy a hand. The colors on her lips were 2 shades too bright. She looked lonely and worn out and old. Okay, I said. Thanks a lot. It's really cool. She smiled, pleased. I'd better get going, I said. But you've been really helpful. I'm glad, she said. Now you don't have to be a stranger. Now, you don't have to be a stranger. I know you have your MTV and your email websites, but if you ever have a little time, come by and say hello. I will, I said. I promise. She made a move to stand. No, stay, I said. I can't let myself out. I closed the door carefully behind me and stared down the sidewalk, then stopped short. Casey was coming across the street, carrying a tray with a little pitcher and a box of cookies. When she saw me, she raised her eyebrows but kept walking. What are you doing? I asked, grabbing her by the elbow. Yeah, what are you doing? I asked, grabbing her by the elbow. She jerked away. Being neighborly. Listen to me, Casey, I said. I need to talk to you about your friend. Why? Why? She asked. her lip twisting into a sneer. Does Megan want to cut? Yeah, does Megan want to ask her some questions? Stop it, I said. Leave Megan out of this. She stared at me intently for a long few seconds. Megan is on my list. Yeah, Megan is on my list, she said, looking me up and down. And so are you. What is your list? I asked. I don't understand what you're doing. You are not meant to understand, she replied. Stop being crazy for a goddamn second, Casey. Yeah, fucking creepy. Yeah, you are not meant to understand, she replied. Her gaze fell on me like a heavy coat weighing me down. I felt as if my feet were rooted to the ground. She turned and walked up to Mary's door, ringing the doorbell in quick bursts. I couldn't even move. But as she disappeared inside, the lead-in feeling dissolved. Yeah, the lead-in feel, the lead-in feeling dissolved, and I dashed home and into the kitchen. I looked in the trash and found an empty packet of lemonade mix. My heart stopped pounding quite so hard. Maybe Casey was just going to do what I'd done. Ask Mary about names. I went to the sink to get a glass of water, and that's when I noticed the grains on the counter. For a second I thought they were sugar crystals. But then I flipped on the light to see that they had the faintest cloudy green tint. I opened the cabinet under the sink. The first thing I saw was a box of ant poison sitting slightly askew. I poured a little into the sink. Tiny green grains, no bigger than sand. I didn't bother to close the front door behind me. I tore back to Mary's house, pounded on the door, and pulled it open without being invited. I heard Mary exclaim from the living room and found my sister pouring a second glass of 2 glasses of lemonade. Casey, I said, stop. She's not causing any trouble, Mary said. It's really all right. Casey looked at me. You heard Mary, she said. I'm not causing any trouble. She stared straight into my eyes, but her glare didn't seem to lock onto me the way it had outside. I didn't get the same heavy, captive feeling. Go home, I said. Neither of us spoke. After a few long seconds, Mary cleared her throat and stood up. Alexis, dear, I'm so glad you came back. You forgot your sweater. She hung it over my arm and then retreated, sensing that her gesture hadn't eased the tension. Casey is in on the ghost shit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she hung it over my arm and then retreated, sensing that her gesture hadn't eased the tension. I'm sorry, Mary, I said. My sister has to go home. Casey cocked her head. I'm sorry, Mary, I said. My sister has to go home. Casey cocked her head. I took a step forward, and Casey took a step back. Huh? Go, I said. Now. Casey took another step backward, then turned to Mary and glowered as intensely as a lion watching its prey. I began to move closer, and Casey took off at a full run down the hall and out into the night. I'm sorry, I said to Mary, trying to sound casual, dumping the lemonade back into the pitcher and setting everything on the tray. She's just way behind in her schoolwork, and our parents will get really mad if she doesn't. Mary is watching me. Mary was watching me, wide-eyed. Mary, I said, turning to face her. Do me a favor. Promise me you won't let Casey back in tonight, or tomorrow. Yeah. Do me a favor. Promise me you won't let Casey back in tonight, or tomorrow. Not until I tell you it's safe, no matter what she says. She didn't seem to hear me. She pulled her shawl a little snugger over her shoulders and shuffled toward a window. She checked the lock and then shuffled to the next window and checked that lock. Are you okay? I asked. Hold on. Okay. Um, are you okay? I asked. She faced me, and I noticed a shudder in her hands and a faint quiver in her voice. Alexis, she said. Yeah, Alexis, she said. The last time someone looked at me like that was... My whole body went stiff with fear. 1996, she whispered. I sat on my bed with the photo. Mildred, Patience. These girls, they were in my dream. They were the ones who chased the little girl in my story. They had thrown rocks at her until she'd fallen from the tree. Oh, yeah. Mary knows. Mary knows something's up. Yeah, these girls, they were in my dream. They were the ones who had chased the little girl in my story. They had thrown rocks at her until she'd fallen from the tree. But if these girls weren't just minor characters in the story I'd made up, if they'd really existed... I shifted my weight and the books I stacked on the pillow tipped over. The Sawamura paperback fell open. Someone had written something on the inside cover. Just like Megan, I thought, leaning in to read it. Yeah, okay, yeah. The Sawamura paperback fell open. Someone had written something on the inside cover. Just like Megan, I thought, leaning in to read it. Shara C. Wiley, 989 Whitley Street, Surrey, California, September 20, 1996. My breath caught in my throat. Shara had owned that book, and the only reason she would own that book was if there were already something in the house. Something evil. Looking at the neat handwriting. Oh no, I need to get my... Okay. I just need to save my laptop from dying. It is saved. Yeah, Shara had owned that book, and the only reason she would own that book was if there were already something in the house. Something evil. Looking at the neat handwriting, I thought of whispers that first night, 8 years ago, and how they had invited me outside to play. Wasn't that what Casey had said to me the other night when she came into my room? Come play? I'd been starting to wonder why the ghost chose Casey and not me, but something had reached out to me, and I might have been lured to my death the very first night we lived here, if I hadn't grabbed onto the necklace, which had belonged to Shara. When we were inside Mary's house, near my sweater, in the pocket of which I'd left the charm, Casey wasn't able to control me. Shara, I whispered, taking the half heart out of my pocket and holding it tightly in my fist. Nothing happened, but by that point I was completely 100% sure. My charm wasn't evil. It was good. Shara was protecting me, but from whom? My hands shook so badly I could hardly get the microfiche slide to fit in the negative frame. I placed the slide inside and set the timer for 5 minutes, then hit the expose button. The light popped on. Only about 4 articles at a time shone through onto the notebook paper. Onto the notebook paper I'd laid flat out on the enlarger. And only about 4 articles at a time shone through onto the notebook paper I'd laid flat on the enlarger. And the print was so small that I had to lean in close to read anything smaller than a headline. Nothing. I shifted the negative tray so a different set of articles was in the light. 4 more duds, and another 4, and then on my 4th try, I found it. Wiley death haunts community. Huh, if only they'd known. I skimmed the text, but there was nothing new. Mainly a human interest piece on the continued concern of the neighbors, a week after the fact. But at the bottom was a featurette, a mini article in its own little box. I tucked my trembling hands into the sleeves of my sweatshirt and leaned in close to read. The unhappy home on Whitley Street, said a line of bold text inside the box. Surrey. It's been less than a week since the October 15th suicide at 989 Whitley Street, but many neighbors are anxious to put the innocent behind them. Most residents regard the death of young mother Shara Wiley as a tragic reminder that no matter how well you think you know your neighbors, there's always something under the surface. Several local residents declined to be interviewed for the story, but Francine Besser, 89 of Denishan Avenue, a resident of downtown Surrey in the late teens and early 1920s, recalls another tragedy that occurred in the Edwardian era four-bedroom house constructed in 1897 by a prominent local merchant, Robert For, Forsyth, Forsyth and his wife Victoria. Robert and Victoria, the parents from my story. It was like the final depressing puzzle. Yeah, it was like the final depressing piece of a puzzle. It was really quite something to my mother's generation, Mrs. Besser recalls. Mr. Forsyth even built indoor plumbing before the city provided it, you know. Surrey was just a little country town back then. They were the wealthiest family in the county. Local records show that the Forsyths in mourning over the death of their 11-year-old daughter, Sarah, were killed. Yeah, local records show that the Forsyths, in mourning over the death of their 11-year-old daughter, Sarah, were killed in a fire that destroyed Robert's warehouse on the west side of town, near what is now the site of St. Vibiana Church in late 1902. Evidence found at the scene led police to conclude that the fire was a result of arson, likely committed by Mrs. Forsyth, whose madness was attributed to her grief, but many well have originated that the lead pipes used in the house's plumbing, which may have also contributed to their daughter's recorded behavioral and health issues. Let me say that again because I feel like I'm just like, it. Yeah, evidence found at the scene led police to conclude that the fire was a result of arson, likely committed by Mrs. Forsyth, whose madness was attributed to her grief, but may well have originated with the lead pipes used in the house's plumbing, which may also have contributed to their daughter's recorded behavioral and health issues. I remember the hazy, hypnotized feeling of the story pouring out of me, as if I were just a conduit. It wasn't my story at all. It was a true story. The house's story. Back in my room, I picked up the photo, studying the girls' unsmiling faces, and noticed for the first time that the white border I picked up the photo studying the girls' unsmiling faces and noticed for the first time that the white border that rimmed the edge of the picture ended abruptly on the right side. A portion of it was missing. I flipped it over to look at the list of names. Underneath the list was a black scribble. Something had been crossed out. I leaned in closer. Was that an S? And the second letter could have been an A. The third was an R. Sarah. Someone had wanted to forget she ever existed. They scratched off her name and cut her out of the picture. I studied the edge of the image. Nothing was left that would indicate she'd been in the photo, except the small elbow of an arm, and half the face of the doll it clutched. It was the same doll of my story, my dream. Is that what Mr. Saramura was talking about when he said power center? Something Sarah loved so much that she held it close even as she fell to her death? doll. What if what if it was in the house somewhere? What if it was taking control of my sister? And what if it had taken control of Shara and sent her into the murderous spiral that ended in her own death? Casey's list. The names. Those were the girls responsible for Sarah's death, and their daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters. It was a hit list. I thought about what Casey had been saying the other day when I heard her talking to her dolls. She's new. Think of what she's been through. So now I knew what Sarah's power center was. I knew what she was using to force my sister to help her carry out her vengeance. I just didn't have the faintest clue where it was. Oh, she's gonna do something about that doll, man. I just didn't have the faintest clue where it was, or how to get it away from Casey. You know. I just didn't have the faintest clue where it was, or how to get it away from Casey without, dying. And that is the end of that chapter. Kind of want to read another chapter. Yeah, I think I'll read another chapter because it, makes it, spooky in a way. Because I do want to play more Mario. I've been playing Mario Odyssey and I love it. I just beat the game and now I'm just, searching for more of the power moons. It's totally fun, but it's also can be totally frustrating. Okay, so I will read this next one. It's fairly short. It's 5 pages. It's not a big deal. Okay. Chapter 24. I felt the day's events caked on my skin like a greasy film of badness. I desperately needed a shower, so I was so worn out that I didn't hang up my clothes as I took them off. I just left them on the floor next to my bed. I let the hot water pour over me and closed my eyes in the stream. I spent a few extra minutes just standing there, pretending everything was fine. No ghosts, no guilt, no crazy sister, no breaking Carter's heart. It was nice. When I got out, I put on my pajamas and combed my hair, then went down to the kitchen to get something to eat. I stood in the dark with my back to the counter, eating a granola bar. When I finished, I dropped the wrapper in the trash, swept the crumbs into the sink, and looked around the room. The front door opened, and I almost said something, expecting it to be Mom, but it was Casey. Only it wasn't Casey. She moved with a grace I had never seen in my sister, with a poise that I had to assume was Sarah's poise, Sarah's grace. She didn't see me as she ascended the steps toward the second floor. I thought she'd been in her room all night. I didn't have time to think, because just then the garage door rattled open, and Mom pulled up the driveway. I pretended to be going through the fridge when she came inside. "Oh, hi, Alexis," she said. I closed the refrigerator door and followed her upstairs. When she was safely in her room, I sighed and went across the hall to my own room. The blue numbers on the clock glowed 12:06. I flipped the light on. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. "Isn't this nice?" said Casey's voice from the corner of the room. She moved out of the showers and came toward me. She cast a glance at the door, and it shut by itself. Just the two of us together. I stood frozen in place. "Do you know what time it is?" I did. It was 12:06. "It's decision time," she said. "Past midnight. October 15th. I feel different. I feel different," she said, spreading her fingers wide and steadying them. I feel like today is going to be a big day." The blue moonlight shone on her through the window, the panes of the window frame drawing a grid on the side of her body. "You should too," she whispered, "because it's your last day." "Casey, you made up your mind?" Even in the dim light, I could see the green eyes burning. "Don't call me that." "Yeah, don't call me that," she snapped. Her voice was thin and rasping. "Casey is gone." White, hot fear poured through me. "I know who you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I know you're evil. My little sister might be fooled, but I'm not. And I'm not going to let you have her." She raised her eyebrows, like she hadn't expected me to make this connection. Let her go," I said, trying to sound sure of myself. But my shaking breaths broadcast how afraid I really was. Casey narrowed her eyes and spoke in her regular Casey voice. "Lexi, you think you're so smart, Lexi." She said Lexi. I nearly passed out from relief. "She's my friend. She wouldn't hurt me. She promised." "She's evil, Casey," I said. "Do you think demons keep their promises?" "She tried to be your friend too. She would have helped you." "Maybe I don't want to be her friend. Did you ever think of that?" "It's your fault she's even here," she said. "You're so mean to me. You pretend you like me, but you think I'm stupid. You treat me like a baby. She's the only one who cares." "Is that what she told you?" I would whip her ass so bad. Dude, same. Same though. I'd be just like, "You bitch. You wanted to keep on being possessed." "Is that what she told you?" I asked. Casey hesitated. "Yes, but it's true." "You know what she's planning?" I asked. "You know all the work you've been doing for her? She's going to hurt people, and you'll be the one who gets in trouble. She's using you." Casey swallowed hard. "Do you really want to hurt Mary?" I asked. "And the librarian? And us? Casey, your family? We're on that list. After you do all of her dirty work, she's going to kill you too." My sister took a moment to consider this, but it didn't seem to disturb her very much. I took a step backward. "Don't try to run," she said. You won't make it out the door. And if she doesn't, I will. Yep. Up to that point, I had managed to convince myself there was a separation. There was Casey and there was Sarah. But it seemed like the line was blurring. Casey, we're sisters. Why would you hurt me? Why would you do... What would you do without me? No reasoning worked better with Casey than the what would you do without me argument. If I ever wanted to win a fight with her, all I had to do was say something about how useful she, how, all I had to, if I ever wanted to win a fight with her, all I had to do was say something about how awful she would feel if I died, and she would immediately burst into tears and apologize. If there was any of that codependent instinct left in her, I wanted it on my side. Maybe I could bring her back through the magic of guilt. The thing is, Lexi, she stiffened and took a step closer. I'd be fine without you. She put her hand on my shoulder. Her touch was like 100 bees stinging me at once. I tried to back away and stumbled. I tried to back away and stumbled, falling against the wall for support. Still, she didn't move her hand. She was drawing the energy, the life, out of my body. The world spun and my head started to ache. I lost my balance and slid to the ground, landing on my forearms and knees, like a baby crawling. Casey knelt at my side, her fingers still locked in place. She's really going to kill me. I braced my arms against the rough carpet, trying to keep my head off the floor, as the whole world moved in waves. It was like being on the deck of a boat in the middle of a storm. I couldn't tell which way was up. My hand hit the bed with a thud. Hold on. My hand hit the bed with a thud. Nausea rose up inside my throat. I tried to force it back. I tried to take a deep breath, but I couldn't breathe. I tried again, opened my mouth and attempted to swallow huge, gasping breaths, but even though I could taste the air, sweet and cool, on my tongue, I couldn't force it down my throat into my lungs. I was drowning, sinking, dying. No, stop! It was Casey's voice. She seemed to swing past me like a pendulum, her wide blue eyes so close to my face, her claw-like grip still burning into my shoulder. Stop! You're hurting her! She cried. A memory flashed into my head. The cool, smoothing-edged feeling of the heart charm against the skin of my palm. The heart. It was the only thing that could help me. My arm thrashed around like a fish out of water, finally hitting the rough knit of the sweater I'd left on the floor. I reached into the pocket and felt the silky length of ribbon. My fingers gripped for it, and my vision started to go gray. A horrible pounding sound echoed inside my head. Finally, just as I was about to give up, my finger made contact with the smooth metal. I grabbed it and slapped it wildly against the top of Casey's hand. She gasped and let go of my shoulder. Air came rushing back into my lungs. The throbbing whooshes went silent, and all I could hear were Casey's soft sobs. Yeah, the throbbing whooshes went silent, and all I could hear were Casey's soft sobs. She scooted a few feet away and was holding her hand protectively near her body. I wrapped the ribbon around my hand and thrust my arm forward, the flat, the flat of the heart making contact with my sister's bare foot. She jerked her head up, stared at me through shocked eyes, and then went limp and passed out, slumping sideways onto the carpet. Every breath of air was like a piece of sandpaper rubbing against my throat. I had to call Megan and tell her. I had to call out to Mom, but I collapsed. Darkness washed over me. Oh boy. What's gonna happen? Who knows? We're just gonna have to find out in the next video. Well, thank you so much for listening. I hope you had a blast. I had a blast. I will see you in the next video.